A little background information about me, Rob Warfield, is probably necessary to understand the rest of this story. Until I was about 14 years old, I was a juvenile delinquent. I constantly got into fights because I was tough, bullied many other kids, stole from stores and locales, and once stole a car with some older friends for several hours. At the age of 14, I was placed in foster care because my parents could no longer handle me. I know that many children have terrible experiences in foster care. Fortunately, that wasn't the case for me. My adoptive parents were big, tough, business people. I needed to stick to the line. My adopted father played lacrosse in college, and one of my adopted brothers, a year older than me, also played lacrosse. Working odd jobs allowed me to save enough money for a lacrosse stick. My adoptive parents pushed for me to join the lacrosse league, and I trained constantly with my brother and father. It turned out that I had grown to almost the ideal size for a lacrosse forward. Since I turned 18, I have stood exactly 6'1" barefoot and 196 lb, 89 kg, naked. Long story short, by the time I was 18 and a high school senior, I was good enough to get a scholarship to a Big Ten school. I started 3 years second to senior as an offensive lineman in college, earned a degree in electrical engineering in 4 years, and received a number of lucrative job offers when I graduated. I met my wife Jasmine, a marketing major at ACC, shortly after I graduated. We got married when we were both 24 and enjoyed life as a highly mobile couple. My wife Jasmine and I met Evelyn Simmons and her husband Brett when we moved to North Carolina, when we were both 26 years old in search of better jobs. Evelyn and Brett are 3 or 4 years older than Jasmine and I, and they were the most beautiful couple we had ever seen. Women's appearance is often exaggerated in stories, but this was not the case with Evelyn. I truly believe that at the time I met her, since she was 18, Evelyn had never been in a room in her life where she wasn't both the most beautiful and sultry woman. I don't know much about men's looks, but judging by the women's reactions, Brett was pretty much in the same class as Evelyn as far as looks were concerned. Although I liked Evelyn, I admit that she was a little prim at first, but she was clearly also kind and sensitive. Surprisingly, she was almost shy. Considering her appearance and the fact that she was really smart, shyness was an unexpected quality. Along with Brett and Evelyn, we met socially with a number of other couples around our age in the Research Triangle area of North Carolina. Among them were Cindy and Dale, Sue and Rick, and Mandy and Carl. However, after we lived in North Carolina for a few months, Jasmine and our other friends seemed to change. They seemed to look down on Evelyn. I had a hard time understanding why until I realized it was jealousy when I overheard a conversation in my kitchen between Jasmine and 2 of her friends. I was working on a project outside the kitchen area of our home, and since it was a nice spring day, the windows were open. God, Jazz is my wife's nickname given by her friends, although I never called her that. That bitch Evelyn really freezes me. You see my husband Dale drooling every time he's around her? Cindy growled. She's the sexiest bitch around and always seems to be strutting her stuff, Sue added. Rick and I had our biggest fight over her after he was even more obvious than Dale drooling like a lovesick bloodhound. Rob isn't that obvious, Jasmine chimed in, but like the rest of the troglodytes we're married to, I'm sure he stares at her from behind his ever-present aviator sunglasses whenever he's around that bitch. I'd love to knock her down, Cindy giggled while Sue chimed in, joining in on Cindy's fun. Tearing Evelyn off her pedestal and calling her all sorts of names that were both wrong and inappropriate continued for at least another 5 minutes before I got tired of it. I loudly announced my presence by bursting through the side door and into the kitchen, finally ending the slander party for now. Oh, hi, Sue. Hi, Cindy. I smiled, pretending that I had just arrived. What's happened? Just a little girl talking. Jasmine smiled back, graciously allowing her to kiss her on the cheek. I chatted with them for a bit, drank a bottle of iced tea, and then announced that I was going to do some odd jobs right outside the kitchen window. Soon after, Sue and Cindy left, so the put Evelyn down party was over. The way these 3 were talking really pissed me off. This was especially hurtful because both Sue and Cindy had undoubtedly hit on me in the past. I can easily tell the difference between harassment and flirting, and this was a hit. And yet they called Evelyn, who I had no reason to think was promiscuous, a loser, a woman. I was also concerned about Jasmine's attitude. She had changed since we moved to North Carolina, or maybe the real she was coming out, because I never saw the evil, snide side of her that I had seen for the past few months. Anyway, whenever our group of friends got together, the women never ostracized Evelyn in mixed groups because of how good-looking her husband Brett was. I tried to be as nice as possible to Evelyn to compensate for those subtle ways in which women avoided her. Evelyn never dressed particularly provocatively. She just had so much natural beauty, sultriness, and poise that she couldn't hide it. We had lived in the Research Triangle area for about a year when tragedy struck. Evelyn was in a serious car accident and ended up with significant facial injuries and had to have her left leg amputated below the knee. Even after months of plastic surgery and rehabilitation, she did not look well, in part because the left side of her face was covered in scars that no plastic surgeon, no matter how skilled, could completely correct. The saddest thing was how other women reacted to her accident. Although they seemed sympathetic in front of Evelyn, behind her they seemed almost joyful. The way Evelyn was treated was not my only complaint. Jasmine had definitely changed, and by the time we had been living in North Carolina for about 18 months, I liked Brett, Rick, Dale, and Carl less and less every time I interacted with them. They all played football at small colleges, Division III, and somehow thought it was better than me playing lacrosse at a Big Ten school. I never tried to explain to them how naive it was. Athletes from the Power 5 conference, which includes the Big Ten, are typically in a much different class than Division III athletes. Jasmine seemed less affectionate than when we got married, much more snide and more concerned with material things. I talked to her about these changes, but she either explained that her ideas were just maturing, or that I was making them up, or that I was becoming more sensitive. As for the guys in our group, I only interacted with them when we had social events with our wives. I joined a recreational softball league, started taking tennis lessons, and made a different group of male friends who were easier to get along with. The first significant event occurred about 3 months after Evelyn's accident. I visited her in the hospital several times, helped her connect with an excellent rehabilitation center, and she was fitted with a prosthetic lower leg. I was jogging in a local park when I passed a secluded grove containing a couple of benches and heard what I thought was sobbing. I paused my run, wondering if anyone was in trouble, and entered the grove. Evelyn sat on the bench and cried. I walked up to Evelyn, sat down next to her, and touched her hand before she even realized it was me. She flinched when I touched her hand, but when she saw that it was me, she buried her head in my shoulder and continued to cry. I hugged her and just let her cry for a few more minutes. After a few minutes, Evelyn had regained most of her composure, looked at me, wiped away her tears, and said, "I'm sorry you had to see my self-pity party, Rob. I understand you've been through a lot, Evelyn. If what happened to you happened to me, it would take me a long time to come to terms with it. I think I shouldn't be so superficial and worry about how my appearance has changed, or that I can't exercise like I used to, or wear clothes that show off my legs, which I used to vainly enjoy," she answered, smiling faintly. "You're not shallow, but you seem resigned. You don't have to humble yourself. You can have the same good life as before. Not with that terrible scar on her face," Evelyn snorted, turning her left side to me, "or with that artificial leg." She continued to bang on her left shin, which created a metallic sound. "That's where you're wrong, Evelyn," I continued. "You may not be in the 100th percentile in appearance like you used to be, but you're still not below the 98th. People with even greater needs for prosthetics than you are able to perform physical tasks just as well as ordinary people." Evelyn looked puzzled. "Why do you say that when you know damn well it's not true?" I looked disgusting. At least Brett seems to think so. I chuckled. She hit me on the hand and swore, "Not funny." "Yes, it's funny," I replied, "because you're a beautiful, sultry woman that any man would be lucky to marry. And if Brett thinks otherwise, then he's the one being superficial." After a long pause, she remarked, "You must be blind." No, in fact, I see very well. I'm lucky with my eyesight. I think you need to change your attitude. What I'm saying is, why don't we meet twice a week to work on your mobility? I will accompany you wherever you want to go, so that if you have any physical problems or feel any discomfort, I can help. Besides, perhaps my attention will make you believe the truth, namely that you are a beautiful, sultry woman. Evelyn protested for a few minutes, but then agreed. We started by walking on the park's treadmill, and when she got tired, I carried her the last 500 or so yards back to her car. We agreed to meet twice a week for an hour or so to work on her mobility, and after a while, I noticed she was putting on makeup again in an attempt to minimize the scarring on the left side of her face. I made no attempt to hide my communication with Evelyn from Jasmine. I actually invited her along because I thought another woman's support would be helpful. Jasmine refused dismissively. I did not like it. After about 6 weeks of our sessions, Evelyn's attitude and mobility improved significantly. However, she had one serious drawback. She said Brett was becoming more distant every week, and that she was sure he was having an affair. When, after one of our sessions, she revealed her suspicions of an affair, I sat her down and talked to her about it at length. After talking to her, I wasn't convinced she was right, but because it bothered her so much, and because she and I had become good friends, I offered to investigate her. "When do you think he is most likely to play the fool?" I asked. "It seems to vary, but it's almost always early on Saturday morning. Would you mind if I temporarily disabled his car one Saturday, installed an electronic tracker on your car, and he had to use it?" Working as an electrical engineer, I had access to every type of sophisticated electronics there is. I can easily find out if he cheats on Saturday afternoons. You will call me this Friday evening after you are sure that he will not use his car in the evening. You leave the side garage door open, and I'll do the rest. A wide smile appeared on her face, and she kissed my cheek. I smiled back. The second significant event occurred when I carried out my plan on Friday evening. After receiving an encrypted message from Evelyn, "My prosthetic leg is hurting tonight. Any suggestions?" I left the party that Jasmine and I went to, under the pretext that I was going to bring more ice for the owner. I snuck into Evelyn's garage, temporarily shorted out a critical chip in Brett's car's starting circuit, and inserted a magnetic tracker into Evelyn's rear wheel well. This took a total of 4 minutes. I grabbed some ice for the host and headed back to the party. On Saturday, Jasmine went to her usual Saturday shopping with Sue or Cindy. I don't remember which. So I was free to follow the tracker in Evelyn's car while I did some computer work at home. As soon as I saw Evelyn's car moving, I jumped into my car and followed her. Imagine my surprise when I found it parked in front of Mandy and Carl's house, right next to Jasmine's car. I knew from conversations at the party on Friday night that Mandy had left town. I parked on the next block and sneaked behind Mandy and Carl's house. No one was visible on the first floor, but noise was heard on the second floor. It was risky, but I tried the back door handle and found that the back door was not locked. I took off my shoes, sneaked into the house, and went upstairs. My surprise turned to anger when I heard the sounds of sex in the master bedroom and saw, on the same king-size bed, Brett and Jasmine and Carl and Sue. My immediate instinct, based on my past life as a tough juvenile delinquent and my aggressiveness as a lacrosse forward, was to rush in and beat the crap out of Brett. However, I was criminally trespassing on Carl's territory, so I knew it would end badly for me. Instead, I took some candid photos with my smartphone. The angles weren't great, but if you look at all 6 different photos I took, I think you can tell who the 4 participants were. Jasmine's face was certainly clear when she was riding Brett cowboy style, as was Sue's face when she was riding Carl. In one of the photos, Brett's face was also very clear. Carl's face was unclear, as he was lying face down and furthest away from me. But it was his bedroom, and those who knew him could tell that it was him. After taking and quickly looking at the photos, I snuck back downstairs, put my boots back on, and left. I had no doubt that the scammers would switch partners after the first round. Just because I needed to do something, I deflated the 2 rear tires of Jasmine's car, then drove to Evelyn's house. I don't think I've ever been so angry in my life. I've only been able to manage my emotions because over the past few months, I have developed other emotions that I have never felt so strongly before. I called Evelyn on the way to her house, told her I wanted to talk, and asked her to get some drinks, which she might need given what I was about to say. I only needed a short conversation with Evelyn. At first, she cried and said something like, "I know that now I'm ugly and disabled," but I stopped her. "You don't deserve to be treated like this. Brett and Jasmine are assholes, as are Carl and Sue. I have a plan. Can we meet early next week after I have cleared up some details?" "Okay," she answered, wiping away tears. "You need to be as good an actress as you can be for the next week or so to keep Breed in the dark. You can do it?" Whipping away the last tear and putting on a defiant expression on her face, Evelyn replied, "Yes, I can. I'll fix Brett's car and then start developing my plan. I'll write to you about the meeting, probably on Tuesday or Wednesday." "Thank you, Rob," Evelyn said with a half smile and kissed me on the cheek. I started my new life by grabbing Evelyn and planting the hottest kiss I've ever given anyone in my life on her lips, hugging her tightly. She not only did not resist, but also responded to my passion with special zeal. When I pulled away, I smiled at her, went into the garage and removed the short circuit from the jumper circuit on Brett's car, and then drove home. I was proud of myself for not acting too differently around Jasmine over the next few days. The only thing is, I didn't initiate sex. Jasmine was surprised when she tried to start it, but I asked for time off, and she accepted my lame excuse because I had never lied to her before. I was busy for the next few days. I met Evelyn on Wednesday afternoon at a cafe in the building next to her workplace. I wasn't sure she would completely agree, but with minor modifications, she agreed to everything I suggested. We parted with such a passionate kiss, which neither of us had ever had in our lives, and when I left, there was a smile on her face, and a warm glow emanated from her heart. My plan was to be fully implemented within 3 weeks after I met Evelyn that Wednesday in the cafe. In the meantime, we continued our sessions twice a week, each time saying goodbye with a kiss rather than just a hug as in the first few weeks. I actually had to have sex with Jasmine so she wouldn't suspect anything, but I just fucked her like the fallen woman she was, and she seemed satisfied. Everything was going smoothly until a week before the final deadline. I couldn't stand it and put a fly in the ointment. The third significant event occurred on a Saturday evening, a week before my plan was to be fully implemented. It was a barbecue at Sue and Rick's house, where all the usual suspects were present. I was happy that this might be the last time I saw any of the male assholes in our group. While the women were doing something else, the guys, with the exception of me, since I didn't drink alcohol, were each on their 6th or 7th beer and trading lies in the backyard. To my shock, although in hindsight I shouldn't have been surprised, given Brett's demonstrated disrespect for Evelyn, Brett made a disparaging comment about Evelyn that included a reference to both her ugly scar and her metal leg. I couldn't contain my anger. "Why are you a fucking asshole?" I growled. "How dare you talk about your wife like that?" I added a few more expletives, some of which implied that he had an unusual relationship with his mother. Stunned, Brett, to my delight, did something really stupid. I think his reaction was due to the 7 beers, his naivety that playing football at a Division III school somehow made him stronger than me playing lacrosse in a Power 5 conference, then the fact that there were other guys, and his goofy character in general. As he approached me with clenched fists, he growled, "I'll tell my bitch wife whatever I want, and I'll ruin and disfigure your face too." When his face was 18 inches from mine, I headbutted him in the nose, breaking it, and knocked him to the ground, where he lay groaning and gasping. Then my joy grew even greater when Carl, apparently fueled by the same stupidity that had foolishly spurred Brett on, took a swing at me. I grabbed Carl's right fist with my left hand, stopping his drunken punch in the air. With the same motion, I kicked his left knee with my right foot, and, as he fell to the ground, I stepped over his right arm and broke it. Dale looked like he wanted to do something, but I pointed at him and growled, "Do not even think about it." Rick leaned over the moaning and squirming Brett and asked, "Why did you do that?" "Don't worry too much. Rick, Brett and Carl have been screwing your wife Sue for quite some time, apparently. I'll send you photos in the next few days." At that moment, the women ran up, all except Evelyn, who remained in the background with a smile on her face. As Bretta and Carl screamed in pain, and I looked on wild-eyed, Jasmine snapped, "What did you do, Rob?" I calmly replied, "Your lovers attacked me, so I beat the crap out of them." As I walked to my car, Jasmine and Sue shouted at me. I didn't pay attention to them. I was surprised that Jasmine came home. I was already in bed when she did it. She turned on the overhead light in our room and started getting irritated. "Not that you care, but both Carl and Brett had to go to the hospital. Brett has a broken nose and a concussion, and Carl has a broken arm and a bruised knee." Jasmine didn't expect my answer. "Turn off the light, you fucking bitch, and get out of my room and go sleep in the guest room." After the initial shock, she snapped, "You can't talk to me like that." That was all she could get out. I got out of bed, looked into her face, and said, "If you don't get out of here, I'll throw you out on the street without your keys. And you can spend the night on the street or look after your buddies, I don't care who." She began to stutter. "What, do you mean?" Obviously, my previous words did not reach her. Maybe she was drunk, but I didn't let her finish. I carefully picked her up, carried her outside the room, closed and locked the door, and slid our security guard under the door knob. Jasmine banged on the door for about 5 minutes, but I turned on our white noise machine to drown out the sound, and within 10 minutes, I was in dreamland. On Sunday morning, I called Evelyn and asked her if she would mind us speeding up our escape. "I have something to do on Monday, but any time after that is fine by me. I'll have the servers ready for processing by Tuesday and arrange for the movers to come in on Tuesday while Brett and Jasmine are at work," I answered happily. Jasmine tried to talk to me on Sunday and Monday. I pushed her away, saying that we could talk on Wednesday morning, but not before. She still tried to engage me in conversation, but I just walked out. I didn't eat any food with her and didn't have any contact with her until Tuesday. After Jasmine left for work on Tuesday morning, the movers came to our house. They loaded the van with what I wanted to keep. Then, after making sure Brett was gone, I followed them to Evelyn's house. There, we loaded all the things she wanted to take from her house. As the movers were finishing up, the guy assigned to take Evelyn's car to Austin, Texas, showed up, and we gave him her keys and instructions. Once the movers and driver were taken care of, I called and told them to service Brett and Jasmine at their offices. At the same time, I sent cheating photos from my phone to Rick, Mandy, Brett, and Jasmine. Then Evelyn and I kissed passionately and got into my car. We had barely left the research triangle area when Evelyn grinned. "I can't believe I'm starting a new life, with a new job, in a new city, with a guy I've never even had sex with. This last problem will be resolved when we stop in the Atlanta area this evening. You know damn well it's going to be amazing, because I love and respect you and you love me." I grinned. Evelyn laughed, kissed me on the cheek, and then started chatting about our new life and temporary housing in Austin near our new job until we could find a house we liked. I learned several things that night. I can't say it was a surprise, but I was certainly glad to receive the confirmation. 1. Evelyn's presence of a scar on her face and the absence of a leg below her left knee had nothing to do with sexual pleasure. She was the hottest, most passionate woman who completely satisfied me. 2. When you are wholeheartedly in love with someone and come out of a bad situation, sex is as emotionally satisfying as it is physical. 3. Starting a new life with Evelyn was probably the best decision I've ever made in my life, possibly after I came out of the juvenile delinquent phase of foster care. Both Brett and Jasmine tried to call us several times. We only responded to their first calls, during which we simply told them that all communications must be done through our lawyer. Apparently, Evelyn and I hired the same one. We had already split all the cash and securities we owned 50-50 with our soon-to-be ex-spouses, and were prepared to either sell our houses or offer to buy them back. Rick and Mandy called us too. They asked for further clarification about the photos I sent them. I provided additional explanations as well as the name of the attorney Evelyn and I worked with. We never found out what they did with this information. 7 years after we moved to Austin, I consider my life with Evelyn to be perfect. She now has 3 different prosthetics for 3 different situations, including one that allows her to easily jog while we push our 2 kids in strollers. At first, she was embarrassed to appear in public in anything other than long pants, but I convinced her that even with a prosthetic, her legs were amazing, and now she wears shorts or skirts without a second thought. We declare our love to each other every day, and this is absolutely serious. We don't know what Brett and Jasmine are doing. We don't care about that at all. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.